It's been another wild week for the UFO community. First of all, we got Joe Rogan talking about, well, arguably one of the strangest alien encounters we've seen in a while. The UFO community has just witnessed two mammoths, or Goliaths, of the UAP space come together on one podcast. And it's crazy. So it happened over on Jesse Michaels' YouTube channel, alright, American Alchemy. And it also hosted Joe Rogan. The Joe Rogan from the Joe Rogan podcast. So this is obviously quite huge because Joe Rogan is arguably one of the biggest podcasters in the world. Jesse Michaels is very quickly becoming one of the top podcasters and investigators, I suppose, on the UAP space, and both have a vested interest in the UAP topic. So to see both of them sit down and come together in this kind of capacity blows my mind and a lot of other people's minds. So the video dropped yesterday, and it's Joe Rogan, The Truth About Aliens. He finally says it. Within the podcast, they talk about a bunch of different things, right? So first of all, they talk about Joe's dream, which we're going to be talking about quite heavily in this. The search for the truth, age of disclosure, technology and consciousness, the pyramids, myths, genetics, the moon landing, pyramids and stargates, the Epstein conspiracy, JFK, all sorts, right? But obviously, these guys are probably best known at this point for the talking about the UAP topic. And they did not disappoint. They did not disappoint. So this was the trailer that dropped, because the trailer really kind of sets the tone for what to expect from this podcast episode. Take a look at this.
I think we're all here for a reason. I think we're here to experience something very strange and profound. And there's an event that we're building up to. And I think that's why there's this focus on disclosure. That's why this documentary hit so hard. Guys like Marco Rubio are sticking their neck out, and Tulsi Gabbard and Rep Luna. You know, she came on my podcast too, and she was telling me some stuff that was just like mind blowing. And she really got me to read the Book of Enoch. She's like, you got to read that. Like that is nuts. And that could have easily been attached to the religious canon, but some rabbis disagreed with it because it didn't vibe with the Torah. So like, let's chuck that one out. But it's in the same lump of Dead Sea Scrolls as they have the Book of Isaiah, which is really fascinating because Wes Huff, when he was on my podcast, explained to me that the Book of Isaiah that they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls is verbatim the same as the Book of Isaiah that was 1,000 years more recent.
Whoa!
1,000 years. So this was the oldest version that they thought was the oldest version. And then they found the Dead Sea Scrolls version, which was 1,000 years older, verbatim.
As you can see, kind of really sets the tone for what was to kind of come on the episode, right? But interestingly, obviously you may remember a few weeks ago, there was a Joe Rogan podcast episode that came out. I can't remember who he was with. They do explain it in the clip. The name escapes me. But Joe Rogan spoke about a dream he had, right? Where he was in connection, like almost telepathically, with some kind of being, some kind of something, and they just kind of communicated with one another. Now, Joe was like, oh, you know, to me it was just a dream, but the person who was on the podcast with was like, nah, this goes a lot deeper than just a dream. And they speak about this quite heavily on the podcast episode that dropped. Take a little listen to this.
I want to actually start with, you had a dream.
Yeah.
And this was a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
You had Brett Weinstein on, great evolutionary biologist, and you started off the episode with this trippy dream you had. You want to describe it?
It was the weirdest dream I've ever had in my life because it was the most realistic dream and is the only dream that I can ever remember. I sleep really well. Like, I'm one of those guys, I can go to sleep on a pile of rocks. I can always sleep. It drives my wife crazy because she has a hard time sleeping, and I could just conk out. I could not go back to sleep. It's the only dream I can remember that I couldn't go back to sleep. I don't think I've ever had that happen to me before, where I woke up at like 3 a.m. or whatever it was, and I was like, I'm up now. Like, there's no way. I laid in bed, I think, for like an hour, and then I just went to the gym. I was like, there's no way I'm going back to sleep. It was very strange. It was very strange because it was like, what is this? It wasn't like a regular dream where, like, oh, you're dreaming. It seems like vague and weird and kind of, opaque. It was vivid. It was very strange. And there was these very slender, tall, human-like things that were talking to me. They weren't gray. They were kind of like pinkish, like us. They were, like Caucasian-looking creatures. But they were messing with me. Like they scared me, and they're like, we're just playing around. And so they were doing there was some weird kind of communication telling me to relax. And the environment was very different too. It was very vivid. It was like some sort of a corridor, but it didn't seem normal. It seemed very strange. Like I remember the walls were lit very weird. And I also remember that there was some sort of water and reptilian element to this. Like they were letting me know, like almost like they had barriers that were very sloppy that were keeping these things out, but they were doing their best. They had people or beings like monitoring and feeding these things and keeping them out. And I was like, what is going on here? And it's like, is this telling me that they're doing their best to keep something from getting to us, but that it's not that secure, that it's kind of precarious and a lot more unstable than we would like to think it is? I don't know what that was all about. That part of it was really weird. That part of it was more dream-like, but the communication with them and the interaction with them was very, very vivid. It was really strange. They had larger eyes than a normal human and a larger head, but not crazy. Like not like a gray from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Kind of a little bit like that guy up there.
Oh, interesting.
not quite so big, but like a large head with a very small jaw and larger eyes than normal. But they were smiling. God, I can't remember if they had teeth. I think they had teeth. I can't remember.
Does any part of you think this actually happened, or do you think it was just a dream? Wow.
I don't want to be that guy that like, oh, I know it was real, because I don't.
Yeah.
I was dreaming. I was sleeping.
Yeah.
But it was the most vivid dream I've ever had in my life.
I mean, it's quite telling, isn't it? When, people... There are always going to be people that are like, oh, this means something. Oh, this is an alien encounter. Oh, I've been abducted or some shite like that. But Joe Rogan's and he always has been quite a pragmatic person, especially in the UFO topic. And I think he wants disclosure just as much as the next guy. So I think he knows the consequences of being that kind of way. So he is very, chill about this kind of thing, for want of a better term, I guess. But they also go on to talk about, of course, arguably the biggest thing to happen in the UFO community as of late, the Age of Disclosure documentary, right? And obviously within that, there was big topics about these legacy programs where the governments from across the world have been retrieving crashed craft for a long, long time and were trying to reverse engineer them to try and get a leg up in the technological world. And they talk about that as well.
Dan made this new documentary, The Age of Disclosure, which is excellent. It's one of the very best documentaries on the whole UAP, UFO phenomenon that I think I've ever seen. And there's no real footage in it, maybe a couple minutes of footage of like the Go Fast or the gimbal. But really, most of what it's about is high-level intelligence operatives explaining what they know. And
extremely
what they've been
high
told.
level.
Yes.
People like Woolsey and James Clapper, like
Yes.
these guys who are like DNI level, like overseeing all of the intel agencies, Brennan,
Yes.
All these people, and
Marco
presidents,
Rubio. To his credit, I think his involvement was huge. Because it's the current administration, his involvement, and his urgency.
Schumer, Rubio, all those guys are like, look, a bunch of freaking high-level officers came to us. And either they're crazy or the shit's real.
Most of these people at some point, or maybe even currently, have held very high clearances and high positions within our government.
So this is one of the things that Dan and I talked about. He firmly believes that both the United States and China has retrieved these crashed vehicles, and that they are also in this back engineering program. They're in a back engineering program of their own, and there is a race. And he people talk about it like it's the Manhattan Project on steroids, but I've heard that about AI too, right?
Yeah.
But which might also be true.
Yes.
And they might also be connected in some way.
Yeah.
I think what Rubio is concerned with is that China develops this technology first. And the only way that the United States is really going to catch up is if we open this up.
And there's also an argument allegedly to be made that Russia is in the race as well, as there's been information and stuff. If you remember, who is it? Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp. George Knapp obviously made away with some information from Russia. He smuggled some stuff out of Russia, which, the balls on that guy to do something like that is pretty mental. But then they obviously go on to talk about some other things as well, kind of off the back of the Age of Disclosure documentary, and they kind of talk about disclosure, not the Age of Disclosure like the documentary, but like actual disclosure from the government, and how that's going to be possible. And this is what they had to say.
If the United States, if first of all, they're going to need some sort of an amnesty thing. This is one of the things that we talked about. They're going to need, because for sure there was lying to Congress, for sure there's misappropriation of funds, and probably some corruption. Like when you have no oversight, billions, if not $1 trillion, for sure somebody got some money they shouldn't have got. You're going to have to make all that okay. You're going to have to say, in the interest of national security and the future of the human race, fuck all that. You're going to have to do that. And if they don't do that, we're going to have a real problem, because these gatekeepers are going to continue to gatekeep, because their lives depend on this. Yeah. If they release this, they could find themselves in jail without any amnesty, in jail for the rest of their lives. We don't know how much money was spent. We don't know how much lying to Congress there was. We have no idea how many felonies there were. We don't have no idea. Let's assume that crash retrieval programs were real and that back engineering programs were successful. So you're not going to give this stuff evenly to all these different defense contractors. So if you give one defense contractor one object, and all of a sudden they have this massive advantage, and then the other defense contractor winds up going under, as many of them have gone out of business, well, now you have a major lawsuit on your hands. You have all sorts of, and then probably people are going to go to jail.
There is a lot to it, right? And this is the part of it that no one really seems to stop and think about, is me included, is the fall. Obviously, they know what they're doing. There is going to be a lot of this that will come out in the wash eventually. Whether that's tomorrow, next year, in 10 years, in another lifetime, in another 10 generations. This stuff will come out in the wash. It always does. But the way in which it happens will be so pivotal. And obviously Joe says there, you can pardon a lot of the stuff. I'm sure you can, but at the same time, you got to wonder what you can and can't pardon, and where that very fine line is between morality and legality, I suppose. Then we've got Marco Rubio, who was a key pillar in the Age of Disclosure documentary, basically dropping some, actually just reaffirming exactly what he was saying in the documentary. The UAP community has just had a really interesting update from Marco Rubio when he was asked about UFOs and his statements in the Age of Disclosure. And I've got to say, I was incredibly surprised by his response, but this isn't the only thing that Marco Rubio has gone on to talk about, and we're going to be talking about that today. So, obviously, Marco Rubio was part of the Age of Disclosure, the new documentary that came out about UFOs, UAPs, aliens, and all the rest of it, right? And arguably bought the credibility in a lot of people's opinions. Marco Rubio was, everyone did a great job, but Marco Rubio was, the key pillar in the middle, holding it all together. So he was a very prominent figure and very important figure within the Age of Disclosure documentary, right? Now, he is the current US Secretary of State and former senator, and has been one of the most prominent political figures advocating for the greater transparency on UAPs. His interest dates back to the time in the Senate, when he helped establish a permanent UAP task force in 2021 and repeatedly called for declassifying government reports on unexplained aerial sightings over restricted US airspace. For instance, in early 2023, Rubio highlighted a Department of Defense's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, otherwise known as ARROW, receiving 171 unexplained UAP reports the previous year, many involving, quote, unusual flight characteristics, and urged the Biden administration to release more details on recent recent shoot-downs from unidentified objects. He emphasized that such incidents had been occurring for years without adequate public acknowledgement. Now, Rubio has been most recent and detailed comments come from November 2025 in his documentary of the Age of Disclosure, which was directed by Dan Ferrer, which details interviews with 34 high-ranking current and former U.S. government, military and intelligence officials, including Rubio himself, who claimed direct knowledge of non-human intelligence and an alleged 80-year government cover-up of reverse-engineered extraterrestrial technology. In the film, Rubio described repeated UAP incursions over sensitive sites, stating, quote, "We've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities, and it's not ours. These are otherworldly things that are performing maneuvers that haven't been seen. There's a whole fleet of them. I have seen them with my own eyes, non-human craft and non-human beings." He expressed concern about the phenomenon that could represent a technological leap by adversaries like China or Russia, but also stressed that the need to move beyond the stigma. Quote, "There's a stigma associated with it. Nobody wants to be known as the UFO guy." Rubio advocates for serious investigation, noting that incoming administration are often left out of the loop on classified UAP details due to, quote, need-to-know basis, right? Now, with regards to the Age of Disclosure, a phrase central to the film's title and theme, Rubio positions it as an emerging era of transparency after decades of secrecy. He argues that leaders from both parties view the film as a quote-unquote stepping stone towards declassification and calls it the end of the cover-up. Quote, "I think it is only a matter of time before a sitting US president steps up to the podium to tell the world what they know, that we are not alone, the only intelligent life in the universe, and that the United States government intends to lead a new chapter by ending the era of secrecy and beginning the era of transparency." The documentary, now streaming on Amazon Prime and in theaters, has sparked bipartisan discussions on Capitol Hill, with Rubio's participation credited for encouraging other officials to speak out. Critics, including some experts, remain skeptical on the film's claims, of course, viewing them as unproven despite high-profile sources. Rubio has not posted directly about the documentary on Twitter as of December 3rd, 2025, but his earlier advocacy aligns with the push for openness. That's kind of a bit of a brief kind of backstory on Marco Rubio's place and why he's such a prominent figure within this. Now, he's come out on Fox News since the documentary has dropped, right, to kind of elaborate on his claims, because obviously he makes some pretty big claims, right? Like with regards to, seeing NHI craft and NHI beings. Here's a little bit of clarity on what he meant by this, if it wants to load. The government's like, "Oh, hell no. You're not showing that. Don't even think about it. You think you're funny? You think this is cool? Well, it's not. It's not cool at all." Right, well, that's absolutely not working. So I'll catch you up on that in a minute. But there has also been another post that has been made, which is Alien Disclosure Incoming. A top advisor to incoming Secretary of State Marco Rubio just dropped this bombshell. We're headed toward massive disclosure on UFOs. The US has recovered alien tech and it is handed to private contractors, Rubio leading the charge, but he is not alone. So this comes from here. So Marco Rubio is the most powerful Secretary of State since Kissinger. As such, it is significant that he believes that the US has recovered alien tech and given it to the private military contractors. A senior Rubio advisor says we are headed towards massive disclosure. And that's come from this article right here, which obviously is quite the big deal, because, again, it's kind of piling on and mounting the pressure on this topic, really. But Barack Obama, former president of the United States, has also kind of chimed in on this at the current time. And he's made some comments with regards to, it was more tongue-in-cheek kind of comments, but, there was an underlying tone of something there. At least that's what a lot of people are kind of saying. But Twitter's not playing the game today, so I guess we will have to wait and see on that one. But Okay, call me a conspiracy nut, right? But I've literally just spent the last 20 minutes trying to find the clips that I'm referring to, right, with Marco Rubio. Bear in mind, this comes from Fox News, so it's not exactly like, under the radar kind of backhand, back alley kind of clips that I'm looking for here, right? I started over on Twitter, and Twitter's just not playing the game, right? The video just won't load whatsoever. So I thought, do you know what? I'm sure I'll be able to find something similar over on Reddit. So I went over to Reddit, and the video still isn't working. And then I thought, all right, well, what I'll do is I'll go like a bit overboard, and I'll download the video from Twitter, right, directly from it, and then I'll just replay it from there. Well, I tried that. I pulled up the video, the downloaded video, by the way. It just won't work. And then I was like, right, well, what I'll do then is instead of looking for the clipped version, what I'll do is I'll go over to the full thing and I'll find the statement within the YouTube video because, I got it somehow working here with no audio, mind. Like, I can't get the audio to work. And then if I go over here and I tap the audio button, let me just show you quick. If I go over here and tap this little audio button, the whole thing just kind of freaks out on me. And then it just suddenly stops working. And then I was like, right, okay, so I'll just go over to the YouTube channel like I did before and I'll find it that way. Nope. It's now this one's broken. Like, I don't know if this is just a bugged... call me a conspiracy nut, right? Look, but it just won't work anywhere. I can't even download the clip, have it saved, and then have it work on my personal computer. Like, call me a conspiracy nut. I don't know. Basically, go over to Fox News YouTube channel. I'm going to tell you where to find the clip. It starts about 5 seconds in. That's when the first question is asked. And then from the 26-second mark, that's when Marco Rubio, for about 2.5 minutes, goes on to talk about his response. I wish I could show it to you here, but literally, I have tried every angle. Nothing is working at all. Look, you can even see, I've gone to this website. This is the link to the clip from Twitter. It's not working. It's not working. It's not working. I do apologize, guys. So you're going to have to go and source this one on your own, I'm afraid. And we've got Ross Coulthart, who has come out with a brand new UFO kind of tidbit. And it's crazier than we could ever have imagined. There's been some insane details for the UFO community over the past couple of days. We've got Ross Coulthart coming out and talking about the hat-shaped UFO disc that allegedly just should not exist whatsoever. You've got Marco Rubio, right, coming out and talking about Navy pilots and admirals and generals and people with high clearances who would come forward to share about US programs that they're aware of that the general public doesn't know. This comes off the back of Age of Disclosure. And then you've got Eric Burleson basically stating that whilst they couldn't find details of the programs that Grush named, they did find that they were illegally withholding information from oversight. So we've got some details to dig into. Before we get into it, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. But the first thing that we're going to talk about is the episode from Ross Coulthart and News Nation, right? Did a former Soviet Union citizen tour a UFO and leave proof? Reality check. And within the episode from Reality Check, there's some main characters to talk about and we need to get into. So we've got Gene Sticko, who is a decorated U.S. Air Force veteran with a Bronze Star, former intelligence security contractor for the DoD, CIA, FBI, and other places like this. There's Natalia, I'm going to butcher this, Shanaha Sticko, who is a Latvian mezzo-soprano opera singer who married Gene in 2017 and now living in Boston with their son AJ. And there's Valerie, I think, Chanaha, I've probably butchered that, who is Natalia's father, who died 30th of December 2019, officially a plumber, after the USSR collapse, but actually a highly trained Soviet aerospace and civil aviation engineer. So obviously that's what we're talking about. Now, there was a package back in 2019, so shortly before his death, Valerie sent a large wrapped package to his grandson AJ, then a teenager interested in aerospace. The family opened it after Valerie's death, prompted by a dream Natalia had. And then the contents are hundreds of pages of handwritten technical manuscripts from the 1980s to early 2000s containing advanced physics/math disputing aspects of Einstein's relativity, derailed engineering drawings explicitly labeled UFO and flying saucer, a 30-meter diameter hat-shaped disc craft with 2 main sections extremely heavy equivalent to 16 loaded Boeings and 747s, a silicon-based metal composites, compact thermonuclear pulsed reactor using heavy water, hydrodynamic, or an MHD, propulsion with solenoid arrays, magnetic gravity field manipulation for propulsion and shielding, and then a consciousness/energy/philosophical elements mixed in. So this is like obviously quite a big deal, and a lot of people are kind of like, what on earth could this possibly even mean? Well, apparently it's a craft that should just never have existed, alright? And that's quite a big deal. So they kind of dive into it on Reality Check, of course. So let's talk about this. When Gene dug into his manuscript Natalia's father mailed him before he died, he wasn't looking at doodles. He was looking at a full engineering schematic of a classic hat-shaped disc about 30 meters across and drawn with the precision of someone who measured it, not imagined it. He breaks down the cabin layout with 2-piece hull, the mass equivalent of 16 fully loaded 747s, and the silicon-based alloys designed to interact with the craft's gravitational magnetic field. I have these files courtesy of Gene, and I can confirm this comes from Skywatcher Original, or Signal, sorry, and can confirm that they are schematic drawings, and they are and as such are very detailed. This is what he had to say on Ross Coulthart's Reality Check. Take a listen to this.
He sent your son. Mm-hmm. You do. You see images of a schematic that he or somebody has drawn of what looks like a classic hat-shaped disc flying saucer. The big question, of course, Gene, is this something that he's just doodling in his sketchbook? Or is this something that when you read the documents, and you've now had them translated, that you can reach a conclusion that they were based on something more substantial?
Absolutely. So that became the mission, to understand what exactly these things were. And was it a tabletop hobby? Was it a piece of theoretical work? Or was it exactly what it appeared to be, this engineering of a craft? And I broke that down and chased that down in several ways. Again, I was retired now. You have to understand when this dropped in our laps. And so, I just had to dust off the old skill set and start breaking it down as methodically as I could. And over the course of doing that for the last 4 years and all the inputs that we got in research and all the rest of it, the language consistently represents that it is based on observation. He does not use any language that it might be anything that would appear to be theoretical. The method and the process that he walks through very much consistently reads as observation, measurement, and explanation. So he's obviously preparing this document, this package, these works for somebody else, for another audience.
One of the images that you've got, and I love it because it's the classic hat-shaped disc UFO. And for the benefit of our editors, it's image 6745. And it seems to have dimensions. What does it show of the size of the object?
So the object's about 30 meters in diameter. It's constructed in 2 solid pieces, and those pieces operate somewhat independent even of one another. He goes on, he describes a cabin for the pilots, as long with the intricacies of the system, how it, what's inside, how it operates, how it works. But 30 meters overall. And the weight, I don't remember offhand the exact weight of it, but I found that fascinating because it was like the equivalent of 16 fully loaded 747s.
Wow.
So
really?
It was very, very heavy.
And does he talk about the metals that are used to construct the object?
He does. He completely breaks them down. They're silicone-based metal composites. He discusses how those metals then interact with the gravitational and magnetic fields that it creates around them. He discusses how it creates those fields. But the overlying, they are silicone-based alloys.
And I mean, again, everything you're talking about here, the dimensions of the object, the weight of the object, it does suggest that he's doing these schematics based on observation, that this isn't just speculative research where he's designing a fictional UFO.
Well, and it's not only that, and I always remind people, go back to put it in the context of time, the 1980s, through perhaps as late as 2000. So I primarily focus on 80s through 90s, possibly a little bit later, other work being included in it. Those descriptions are very consistent with what comes out from Bob Lazar in the late 80s, early 90s.
I mean, it's like the more you know, or the more you learn, the less you know. It's crazy. Every time you think you kind of understand something, a curveball like this comes in, and it turns out you actually know nothing. That's not even like the tip of the iceberg, ladies and gentlemen, as Mark Rubio has also obviously made the news. Now, I tried to include this in my previous video. It didn't work. I'll throw it in here. So, off the back of the age of disclosure, obviously, Mark Rubio was arguably one of the biggest tenants within that. He was like the main pillar. He brought a lot of credibility to it. Now, I go into a lot of depth about Marco Rubio, his involvement within this, and all the rest of it in my previous video, so if you want to go and check that out, go and check that out. But this is what he had to say on Fox News with regards to, pilots and stuff coming forward with regards to US government programs. Let's take a little listen.
Around the globe. Yeah. I mean, you're at the highest level of discussions, and we're going to get into a lot of the hot spots and success and all that. But I got to ask you, there's a show that's come out. It's called The Age of Disclosure.
Yeah.
Okay, I know everyone probably, right? Everyone asked you about it?
Sure.
It's a new documentary. We had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities. It's not ours, and presidents operate on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that is...
So a couple points on it. First of all, I'm not disavowing that. It was an interview that was done almost maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate.
Right.
So it wasn't recent. The second point I would make, I was describing the allegations that people have come forward with. I have people that came forward to us. Some of these people were Navy pilots, admirals, generals, whatever, that would come forward and say, that there were programs in the U.S. government that not even presidents were made aware of. So I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of in that regard. A little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because, you're trying to sell a show there. But the fundamental comments, I haven't seen it, but the clips I've seen and people have shown me are fundamentally true, and that is there are things, we know this has been documented, there have been things that fly over the airspace, restricted airspace, be it where we're conducting military exercises or the like, and everyone in the government says they're not ours. And so what I worry most about, just me personally, is that some adversary, another country, for example, has developed some asymmetric capability for surveillance or the like that we just are not prepared for. We're looking for missiles and fighter jets, and they're coming at us with drones and balloons. Yeah. Remember, when NORAD turned on the radars and started looking for balloons, all of a sudden they spotted a bunch of balloons flying overhead. 90% of them were innocent, things. A couple of them were Chinese. And so, but we never look for balloons because our radars aren't trained for that. So that really was the point I was trying to drive at. I can't comment on the rest of the documentary. It has, as I said, claims from people that were former admirals, naval fighters, people with high clearances in government. Some of them are pretty spectacular claims. I'm not calling these people liars. I don't have independent knowledge that what they're saying is true. The one observation I had is we had people that did very important jobs in the U.S. government who are saying these things. So we have people with very high jobs in the U.S. government that are either A, liars, B, crazy, or C, telling the truth. And two of those three options are not good. But I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I don't have any point of, I don't want to call them liars. I just don't have any independent way to verify everything they said.
I spent time, I've been talking to the mother of...
Now, this clip, I've wanted to show this for ages, and it really bothered me that I couldn't share it in my last video, so I feel much better now that I've got that out there. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is that of Representative Eric Burleson, right? So, long story short, he's confirmed that the ICIG was unable to get details of what programs Grush named, that was going on. But apparently he did, or they did, find what they they were illegally withholding information from oversight, which is kind of crazy. So Representative Eric Burleson said the intelligence community inspector general could not obtain details about programs David Grush identified, but did confirm those programs were illegally withheld from congressional oversight. Is Marco Rubio aware of these programs? And this is what Representative Burleson had to say.
Daniel Miller asks, after you met with the
Again, this is off the back of Age of Disclosure as well, ladies and gentlemen.
ICIG, you said some aspects of Grush's claims were true. Can you elaborate on what claims specifically? What role does he? Yeah, good.
Yeah, so that was an interesting meeting. They basically said that they don't have enough information. They weren't able to get into the details of what these programs were or were not doing. But what they were able to investigate, because they're mostly they're investigating the finances, is that the programs are not following the law, that they're not reporting to Congress, that the programs are overly compartmentalized. They're not even, they said that the Office of Inspector General had a hard time getting these programs to even respond to them. Right. That's not acceptable. And so they confirmed, of the Grush's allegations, those were consistent with what he was saying.
Yeah. So what role does the ICIG still have in all this, if any?
They're mostly looking at any kind of...
Is it the financial aspect?
Right, the financial aspects.
There you go. So it's quite interesting that obviously, though they weren't able to find the specific details of Grush and the stuff that he was talking about, they were able to kind of stumble across a bit of a hornet's nest in which they were like, oh, we weren't aware of this. This was completely kept from us, and this is illegal. So I guess every cloud has a silver lining. What do you guys think of this? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Way down there, jump to get the hell out that like button and subscribe. And until next time, I'll speak to you later. Peace.